Today, we're joined by Digitl, the first certified Meridian partner in EMEA. I'd like to welcome Timo Aiden, founder and managing director, as well as Dr. Frederica Vial, team lead for data science at Digitl. They're going to walk us through a real world deployment that they did for Fluge.de, a major online travel brand. So this isn't just a theoretical exercise. They used Meridian to analyze 10 channels over 3 years, eventually explaining 90% of revenue and driving a 3.8 increase in incremental revenue. They're going to be tackling the 3 core themes that mirror our most popular Discord threads: model stability and trust, bridging business intuition via priors, and operationalizing optimization. So, Timo, Frederica, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Jeff, for the introduction, and thanks everyone who already joined the live stream, and hi to everyone who's listening now. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for giving us the opportunity to speak here and to present our case we have done with Fluge.de and also many other cases we have conducted over the last months since beginning of this year. At the beginning, we want to start with a quick introduction of who Digitl is so that you know who we are and why are we talking about this. So we are the first certified Meridian partner in EMEA. So as you might know, Meridian got launched on January 27th, beginning of this year in 2025. And we were like the first partner who got certified for that and who were eligible to conduct all kinds of different projects in Meridian. Generally, we are an international company, dedicated Google marketing platform sales and service partner, which means that we can provide all the Google marketing platform licenses as being a sales partner, as well as, of course, the services. So we focus on helping businesses to set up and to leverage the Google marketing platform. We are headquartered in Hamburg, in Germany. That's where we are based, for example, but we also have locations across Europe, such as in Berlin, in Munich, in Vienna, in Zurich, in Barcelona. So basically all across Europe, where we have people. Basically, we provide services from strategy to consulting to deep expertise in marketing and data analytics, ad tech, data science, and cloud solutions. The interesting thing, especially when it comes to Meridian, is that we are an independent and neutral company. So we are not tied to any media agencies. We don't do any media stuff in general. So we are really a neutral and independent company, which is especially useful when it comes to marketing mix modeling and when it comes to Meridian, because in fact, we don't really care which channel is going to win as long as the model behind that is calculated correctly. So this is why we are set up and positioned as a real neutral and independent agency. So which also means that we can work with all kinds of different other agencies, networks, and so on. It's no problem for us to collaborate and to work with them as well. Here you can see that we are licensed for the Google Marketing Platform and cloud partners. So as I said at the beginning, we are a certified sales partner, which means that we can provide all the licenses as well as the services for Google Marketing Platform, ad tech products, Google Analytics, but also certified in the cloud area, where we are a bit more tool agnostic, which means that we can work with all 3 large providers, but prefer to work with Google Cloud, of course. On the next slide, you can see that we have all kinds of individual and company certifications. So every employee at Digitl has its own individual certifications for products, for services, and here you can also see the Meridian certification badge we have received. And also as a company, we have all kinds of different certifications for being a sales partner, as you can see here. I'm not going to go through all of these, which just proves that we are a very certified and knowledgeable company with lots of experts in all the different fields we are operating in. Today, Jeff already introduced us a bit. Today with me is Friederike. Friederike is leading the data science team and has a huge and long expertise not only in data science, but also in marketing mix modeling. So before Meridian got launched, as I said, beginning of this year, she was already conducting and calculating and modeling all kinds of different marketing mix modeling projects over the course of the last years. So she did her own modeling, her own projects. But since we are a certified Meridian company and since Meridian got launched, to be honest, we did all our marketing mix modeling projects with Meridians and no longer. So since beginning of this year, every MMM project was conducted with the use and the help of Meridian. Yes, and me, I'm actually one of the founders and managing directors of Digitl, have a long history, especially in the Google marketing platform area. But we want to dive right in. And on the next slide, you can see the case study, which Jeff already mentioned. So Flüge.de is one of our clients we already work with for a few years. And what we did at the beginning with them is to implement Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager to take care of their data and to build up the infrastructure. And then we wanted to start with marketing mix modeling, was about to be launched. So we, like last year, we prepared everything in terms of like data harmonization, looking at the different data sources, the traffic channels, and so on. So we had all these steps of starting an MMM project. When we knew that Meridian was about to be launched, we started immediately with a Meridian and Flüge.de. And that's why we were pretty fast in generating results and setting up the project. So we had the results, I think it was beginning of March, when the first project was pretty much done. And what we actually did, we analyzed 10 different marketing channels. We looked back for 3 years. So we took data of 3 years in the past, and the model could explain 90% of the revenue. And the result in the end was that we had an increase of 3.8% of incremental revenue. So for them, that was a huge success. We generated this case study, and the CMO of the company actually went to many conferences to speak about this case because they were really, really happy with it. And right now we are doing some more models for them afterwards because it's not a one-shot thing. It's an iterative thing, and we're doing more MMM projects with Meridian with them. So for us and for the client especially, it was a huge success to do this project, and well, in the end, everyone was happy with it. But how do we set up these kinds of projects? And on the next slide, you can see how typically a project looks like. It basically consists of 4 steps. So the first step is a kickoff. So at the beginning, we sit together with the client, we define the model, we talk about the model input, what marketing channels do they have, who's the contact person, and so on, who's taking care of the project management. Like, so everything which needs to be clarified at the beginning is taken care of in the kickoff workshop. Once that is done, then we go into the data collection and preparation. So there, and that's usually the largest part and the biggest part of that project, is to really go deep into the data, to look at the data, what's available, where do we have it from, is it already harmonized, where is it stored, and all these kinds of different questions are really taken into action then, so that all the data is being prepared so that we can work with it. Once that is done, then we go into the modeling part. So then the real work starts with using the data, using the information we have gained, and do the modeling. Once that is done, then we go into the finalization, where we create the MMM output, and we do the handover, a workshop with the client where we explain all the information we receive from the modeling, share all the information from the project, and basically hand over the entire project. That's basically how a model, or how a project for marketing mix modeling and Meridian looks like when we are conducting it with clients. And yeah, I would say with that, I would like to hand over to Friederike, because now she's going into all the details, how she's really, really doing it. So Friederike.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I will guide you through the challenges you face and that we have solved in our Meridian project, so it's explicitly not only about the Flüge.de case, but yeah, from all the learnings we made on ourselves when conducting the Meridian projects, and we want to share our findings and learnings with you. And yeah, when we look into the community and try to understand what's the challenges you mainly face, or lots of you are facing, then we can categorize it into three main topics. So the first one is mobility, model stability and trust. And here it's about the question how to build statistically stable models that are business plausible. And the second category is about the question how we can bridge the business intuition into prior knowledge, so how we can translate it into the model input. And then we have the last category, which is more about the practical way of operationalizing all the results, especially on the optimization part. And now we can go one by one and answer some of the more explicit questions. So for the model stability and trust, there were many questions on what to do with models that are failing to converge, or models that have low R squared or a negative baseline. And first of all, for all of these struggles, you need to identify first the issue. And that's where the diagnostics, so you have this model diagnostics part. Once you have run your model, and to check if your model is converging, you look at the MCMC chains. That's here for one marketing channel. All these are positive examples on that slide. So what you expect to see is something like this. So for all the chains, the pattern or the distribution is aligned similar to each other. And the trace plot then consequently also has a caterpillar shape and is not too spiky. And if both of these chains and trace plot look similar like this, then consequently also the R hat box plot are in a range that is acceptable. So we want our hat to be smaller than 1.2, and the closer to 1 the better. And we check for all the parameters that are relevant in the model. So this is a positive example, but what would you do if this isn't the case? You have two different approaches. So one is the data. So here we would always start with the data part and go back to the EDA, check again, is the data quality as it should be? Are all the model assumptions met, or do we face any issues here? For example, multicollinearity for some of the channels, or is there a super small share of budget only for one channel, or small variance in the data in the course of the time? So if this is the case, you need to address it, for example, by aggregating channels to a grouped one. So yeah, that's the very first thing to do. It could sometimes be that this does not solve the problem, and then you could have a look what is the share of your total media budget compared to your revenue, generated revenue. And if this share is super small, then you could think about changing the KPI itself. So not to take revenue, which is the standard, but maybe take profit instead, or something else, where we then have a higher share of media budget compared to our KPI. In this case, what you have to be cautious in the following is then when it comes to interpretation of the results, because in ROI is then not return on invest in respect to revenue, but to this new KPI then. That's need to be kept in mind. And when the data adjustments are not helpful, then you could have a closer look at the model settings. So in general, we have experienced that the default settings on Meridian are a very good starting point and should usually work out. But of course, you also have options to adjust here. So one, the model specification parameters. So you can adjust the informed priors for each of the media channel and also the number of knots or set automatic knots. This is possible, but also you can adjust the sample posterior parameters, so the number of chains and burn-in or the step size. This was all about what to do when models fail to converge. The second deeper question was, what can we do if our square is not big enough? Again, how to diagnose this? So you have this KPI, R squared, and this 0.94 is a very good value. So here we have nothing to claim, but of course it could be lower. And then we always have first look into this actual versus fitted plot. Here is an AI generated example for demonstration purpose, and we can see the blue line is the model, so the expected revenue, and we have the green line, which is the actual revenue, and we might identify days or periods of weeks where we have a mismatch between the green and the yellow line, and this is where we miss explanation from the model, and that leads us back to the two solutions that we have. So the data approach is here the correct one, because we are missing some explanation in the model, and we then go back into a discussion with the advertiser, asking them, did you have any marketing activities that we have missed so far? Or is there any seasonal effect we have not taken into account with a control variable? So that's then, for this example, the case where we say, okay, it's repeated in several years and it's always during summer months. There might be some summer peaks, and we need data that can explain exactly that. And then we rerun the model in iterative steps, and then usually the new data can fill the gap, and consequently the R square KPI is uplifted. And our third question is on what to do when we have a negative baseline. So you will identify this case when looking at this waterfall chart into the contribution of each of the marketing channels. And here you can see that the baseline experiences a negative value. So in this case, -5%. And as a consequence, the sum of the media channels impact is bigger than 100%. And first of all, we again check the data approach. So we do not have a positive baseline that tells us we are missing a good control variable that explains what is happening, even though you have no marketing activity. So yeah, we go again back into discussion with the advertiser and try to find seasonality effects or data we can give to the model. If this is not sufficient, you have also the option to set or adjust the model settings. So you can do that by adjusting the number of knots. So the knots are responsible for defining the baseline. What you else could do is that you say use the informed priors and not only set for specific marketing channels, but you say all marketing together has a minimum prior impact or contribution on sales. So this is what you can do in the Meridian code specifically, and we recommend if the other two solutions do not work. And then you have solved this problem. So there are ways to do so. Yeah, so the next category to have a look at, or where you have challenges, is how to bridge business intuition. So how can we translate the advertiser's knowledge into robust prior distributions. And we brought one example. So you will recognize that prior knowledge needs to be incorporated when you recognize one channel is over or under evaluated. And in one of our projects, this was the case for Bing. So we saw a huge or overestimate contribution and thus also an overestimated ROI for Bing. We again went into discussion with our advertiser and they agreed and we tried to solve this with data first. So for Google paid search, we have the Google query volume that controls for the effect that Google paid media is not overestimated. But this control variable usually is not available for Bing. So that was our first solution we wanted to apply. We wanted to add a Bing query volume to be consistent and fair when comparing to Google paid search, but unfortunately in this case it was not possible to get a query volume for Bing. And then we had to use this model setting solution. And here you have the option to set the contribution for specific marketing channels. So you do not need to do it for all of them. In this case, we just set the prior contribution for Bing. And here in this example, it's only 2 media channels. And then you adjust for the second, which is Bing in this case, your expected contribution share. And with that, we were able to reduce, well, of course, not just by gut feeling, but by knowledge and discussions and expectations, the contribution of Bing. And then our third category on challenges was on how we can operationalize the optimization phase. So how can we best translate these best budget allocations in real recommendations? And there were 3 questions or challenges in the community. One is about how to use Meridian for forecasting, then some practical implementation tips for the optimization scenarios, and how can we then translate these recommendations into a real-world media plan. Starting on the top, the forecasting tool. So Meridian is not a forecasting tool. We have to disappoint you here. It's there to calculate future scenario plans and to understand what is the add-on, so the incremental revenue we can generate by adjusting the media activities. But it's not what is our future KPI based on the history. So this is important to keep in mind. And when we calculate optimization scenarios for our customers, we, of course, first of all, need to ensure in the kickoff phase that all the marketing channels are included in the model on a level that it's helpful for later model adjustments or budget decisions. And for that, we, of course, always need to include the advertiser and also our ad tech specialists in the model and in the scenario planning later, of course, as well. And then we always start with a fixed budget scenario optimization because that's the case that is always easy to follow and understand, and we apply it for the last year's data with all the default setting and constraints. And then we go through the results together with the advertiser and ad tech specialist, and then we can incorporate all the strategies they have in mind and all the constraints they know regarding each of the media channels. And that's what you then can, in the next iterative rounds of model scenario optimization, can adjust for each of the media channels the spending constraints, for example, or you can also apply one of the other budget scenarios that are available in Meridian. And the last point is, how can we translate the budget recommendation, that is outcome of the Meridian, into a media plan? And that's where we again have to disappoint you. That's not possible because we're on a different level. And the media plan is very tactical and detailed. Here we want to have information about placements and formats and bits. But what the Meridian output provides is on a strategic level. So we know in the end know what is the most efficient budget per marketing channel to achieve our goal. For example, maximize the KPI. And thus the Meridian output, so the ROIs or saturation knowledge, can only be a guardrail for media planners, but does not provide all the details that are necessary. So here we have to think in this triangulation of MMM, incrementality tests, and attribution. The Meridian results need to be complemented by the insights of the other two measurement solutions. And having said this, what we want you to take home from this session is that Meridian is powerful. So you have a lot of options to adjust the model or also the optimization scenarios, but a lot of challenges you face in the community are not solely solved by just adjusting model parameters, but often the solution lies in a precisely defined data input. So please think about your data input first. And a data scientist alone is not enough to have a successful Meridian project, but you always need the information and knowledge from the advertiser and ad tech specialists or media planners to really have successful. One thing, if you like the session and you want to learn more and stay in touch with us, there are several ways to do so. So when you are interested in the Flügel.de case, there is a Think with Google website. You can read in more depth about how we ran through this project and what were the challenges in this one. Then you can visit us on our website, digitl.com. Here we have a lot of insights articles on all the marketing technology topics we're handling. There are also some on marketing mix modeling in general and on Meridian in particular. And last but not least, that we of course are also on LinkedIn. You can follow us and you can sign up for our newsletter and stay updated on all of our input.
Thank you, Timo and Frederica. Thank you again for giving the presentation. Really great to see Meridian in action. I was especially interested to have you do this session again, just because I think a lot of the issues you solved for Flügel.de are also echoed pretty frequently in our Discord. So I think it really helps to provide a really great frame of reference. We also had a lot of interest previously in our question and answer session. So just for the purpose of posterity, I will kind of ask the same questions again. The first question we had during our live stream was around the topic of moments of statistical uncertainty. So when you were building models for your clients like Flügel.de, did you run into particular moments where, the model was statistically sound, but perhaps business illogical, like say negative baseline or something of that nature? I'm wondering if you had specific, like a specific checklist for diagnosing that and flipping it into a model that the client actually wanted and trusted.
Yes, of course, we also face such challenges in the projects, and that's why we have this iterative process in the modeling milestone. Talking about the checklist, of course, first of all, always check what about the baseline. this should be in an expected range, and of course should not be negative, but it also should not be 95%. We of course want to learn the media's contribution, and thus 95% baseline model is not good. And then we always check the prior and posterior distribution to see if the model is learning well. And in case the model is not learning well, you can then adjust the informed prior distribution and or the model settings, for example, the ad stock. So you have different options on the ad stock type. And the standard is the geometric distribution, but you could shift to the binomial one for long-term effects. And yeah, with that, you could improve this prior and posterior distribution comparison. And the third thing is, of course, the sense check of the channel contribution. So when we have marketing channels that have quite a high share of impressions and spend, we also expect them to be ranked on the top when we have a look at the waterfall chart and interpret all the contributions. And here a deeper understanding, of course, is necessary if things are strange, what we had in the example with the Bing overestimation. Yeah, so that's the three: baseline, prior, posterior distribution, and sense check for channel contribution.
So I think you may have predicted my next question, but I wanted to move on to the topic of priors, which is also like I would say a pretty hot topic in the Discord community. So you previously mentioned that sometimes a channel's contribution, like Bing, in this specific case, might be over evaluated compared to expectations. So in the Discord, we often see the question, something along the lines of, my client or my boss just has a gut feeling. So how do you translate like the results of Meridian into, or how do you translate, excuse me, the marketing directors or clients' intuition into the hard numbers required for a prior distribution?
Yeah, so first of all, we have a kickoff workshop, and here we systematically ask for all the information and data input we need to run a marketing mix modeling or Meridian model. And here we then realize, is it gut feeling or is it really informed prior knowledge that is the outcome of a statistical experiment? And if it's gut feeling, of course, we note it down and recognize it, keep it in the backs of our mind. But what we give to the model is more the informed knowledge from experiments. So yeah, that's where we distinguish, and gut feeling is not inputted to a model only when really the results are misleading and we recognize it's over or underestimated. Then we can talk about price, but the standard price or default price settings in Meridian are always a good starting point. And for the majority of marketing channels, we don't touch them.
Thank you. I'm I'm also wondering, just from like a business perspective, how did you I believe there's always a gap between, translating the results from a statistical model into real world action. So how did you bridge the gap between the model's weekly optimization recommendations and the reality of Logos.day's planning cycle? Did you have to do any, data transformation to take the Meridian output and turn it into an actual buying schedule?
Yeah, so as explained above, it's not possible to really translate model output or optimization outcome of Meridian into a media plan. And when it comes to the frequency, in general, we recommend that in the same cycle that advertisers are making budget decisions, we recommend to run Meridian models. So if you only once a year adjust your marketing budget and make budget decisions, it's not necessary to have more than one Meridian model, because then you have no action on it. But if you have quarterly budget adjustments, then of course it makes sense to also have quarterly updated Meridian models to learn from the output. And so it depends, and then the Meridian outcome is more a guardrail and should be complemented with insights from attribution and incrementality.
Understood. That's a really great perspective. I think that's also reflected in a lot of the Google guides on this topic. So it's really interesting to hear perspective from a real world application. Also, to really linger on this topic of the business side of modeling, sometimes a robust model reveals that, a client's quote unquote favorite channel actually has poor ROI. In this modeling process, did you encounter any results in the Flugger.days model that were, surprising or controversial? And how did you navigate a conversation to tell the client that the strategy they loved wasn't working?
So in our project, this was not the case, because usually the favorite marketing channels are the ones where advertisers have very high share of spend and a good variance over time. So then usually for the 3 years time period, we have data that is fluctuating. And then the result usually shows a high contribution of the marketing channels with tight credible intervals. And in this case, if the ROI is maybe not as big as we expected, then it could be that we have overspent already, and that's something we would see in the response curves, so that we already have a saturation. And what we sometimes experience is that advertisers are testing new marketing channels, for example, CTV, and then they hope that they can measure with the help of Meridian the success or the impact on the revenue. But this is a bit tricky, because if it's just a small channel that was tested for a few weeks or months compared to a 3-year period, the effect has no chance to show up in the results of Meridian, and that's especially true for upper funnel marketing channels. So here we had the case that we had to disappoint advertisers because they were aiming to measure the success of these new channels, but then Meridian is not the perfect tool to measure that, but incrementality tests would be the way to go. And but here we are transparent and explain to the client why things are not working or not looking how they expect things to be.
Got it. So I think in this talk, you gave a really comprehensive view of the modeling journey with Flugger.day. So looking back on your Meridian journey, if you could give yourself past advice on what to do or what not to do, what would you say to your past self?
So one of the major advice is that you should start simple when you build your models, and use the default model specifications, because they are very good starting point. And then in the following iterations of the modeling, you can adjust the parameters, but should do it step by step. So only one change at a time, and this way you can understand much better how everything is connected in Meridian and what change is resulting of the adjustment. And having said this, you should also always save your model iteration results so that you can go back and compare to previous model version results and not need to rerun the model every time you want to compare to previous settings.
Okay, I have one last question here from it's on the topic of optimization. So I think on the topic of optimization versus forecasting, you made a very important distinction in your presentation. Namely, Meridian is not a forecasting tool. It provides future scenario planning. So that's a really common point of confusion I often see in the Meridian community. Um, do you run into this with your stakeholders, and how do you go about communicating the difference between predicting the future versus optimizing a budget scenario?
Yeah, we always try to be very clear from the beginning. So clients that are familiar with marketing mix modelings in general, they are aware what they can expect as model outcome and know that it's more a scenario planner in the end or than a forecasting tool.